All right, so today we are going to do a lesson without a calculator. I want to make sure that you guys know how to add and subtract negative numbers without the use of a calculator, because eventually you are going to have to take tests where there is no calculator allowed. Specifically, there is a no calculator portion of the SAT that you'll have to take. So I want to make sure that you know how to do kind of this basic math in your head and know the rules for it, all right? So before we even get started, there's a couple of tricks that I'm going to teach you. And if you have a way that works for you and I'm happy with you using what works for you. However, I'm going to show you the way that I teach my students how to add and subtract integers. And I feel like this kind of gives them a little bit more something to grasp on here and directions to follow when you're trying to solve. So first off, there's kind of two steps. The first thing you're going to look for is, do I have two signs next to each other? And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So if you have two signs next to each other, you need to rewrite the expression. I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So if you have a positive and a positive next to each other, two plus signs, you get a positive. If you have a positive and a negative, you get a negative. And if you have a negative and a negative, you get a positive. So what I mean by that would specifically be like right here. Okay, these are two signs next to each other. We have a positive and a negative, so the way that I would rewrite this is -8 minus 2. Okay, and the reason I changed it to just a minus is a positive and a minus sign give me a minus. All right, so now there is a super dorky song that I like to use to kind of teach the rules for adding and subtracting these. So step 2 is going to be sing the song. Okay, and I do want you to write this down. I know it's a lot to write down, but it's going to be something you're going to want to reference, okay? So it goes to the tune of row, row, row your boat. It's same signs add and keep, different signs subtract. Keep the sign of the bigger number, then you'll be exact. So I'll go ahead and write that out, and we'll talk about what that means. So it's same signs All right, so let's talk about what this means. So same signs. What I mean by that is you have to look, let's look back at this number 3. You look at the signs in front of both of the numbers. If you look here, they both have a minus sign, so they're both negative. So if they have the same signs, you add the numbers and you keep the sign, okay? So that means I'm just going to add 8 and 2 and keep my sign. So I do 8 plus 2, which is 10, keep my sign. All right, now let's do another one where we have to, where we end up with different signs. So how about let's go ahead and do number 5, okay? So let's go ahead and do our first step, which is, do we have two signs next to each other? Here we do have two signs next to each other. We've got a negative and a negative. So if I look at my chart up top, it shows me that two negatives make a positive. So I'm going to do -5 plus 7. Okay, so now I look and I've got a negative sign and a positive sign, or a minus and a plus. All right, so we have different signs. So it says, if we go to our song, it says different signs you subtract. And what I mean by subtract is you ignore, you just subtract the numbers in your head. So you ignore any of the signs, you just do big number minus small number. 7 minus 5 gives me 2. All right, so different signs subtract, and then you keep the sign of the bigger number. Well, my bigger number is 7, so this is, in my 7's positive. So my answer should be positive. All right. So that's kind of how you go about these. Now, there's going to be some where you don't have to rewrite. So like, let's look at number 10 here, okay? Our first step is always to see, do we have two signs next to each other? Well, guess what? We don't have two signs next to each other here. So we don't have to rewrite it at all. So we can kind of skip to step 2 here. And then we have to sing our song, right? Same signs, add and keep, different signs, subtract. Well, if you look here, this first one doesn't have a sign, right? But if a number doesn't have a sign in front of it, that means that it's positive. So this is a positive 6. You don't have to write the positive 6 in, but it's just, know that if there's no sign in front of it, it's positive. So we have a positive 6 and a negative 7, so we have different signs. So according to our song, we subtract. So again, you just subtract, like you ignore the signs, you just do big number minus small number. So 7 minus 6 is 1. And then according to the song, you have to keep the sign of the bigger number. The sign of my bigger number is a minus, so my answer should be negative 1. Okay? So again, I want you to do all of these without a calculator. Do not use a calculator when you solve these. I want to make sure that you can do these in your head. All right. So next we have slope. So hopefully slope is kind of a review for you. And there's a couple different ways to find slope. Today we're going to talk about 2 different ways. We have our change in y over change in x, or we have our equation, which is y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. Hopefully this looks familiar. If this is new, I'll go through it, so don't worry. All right, so one thing before we even get started, I always like for my students to be able to look at a line and decide if it's positive or negative, the slope, just by looking at it. Okay, so if the line, kind of what you can imagine is like if a person was walking on this line in this direction, always they're walking towards the positive direction. If they're going down the stairs, it's going to be negative. If they're going up the stairs, it's going to be positive. So here, if my guy's walking down, he's going down the stairs. So this guy's negative. Okay, this line would be negative here. Let's see. Well, we don't have a ton of positive here, unfortunately. So here, if I draw a little stick figure, he is going to be, as he walks, he's going up. So this is going to be a positive line. So here, let's look at this guy. If I drew in a stick figure, is this guy going to be walking up or down? Is this a positive or negative slope? The slope is negative. Now, the reason I like to kind of have my students be able to identify is if you're using just this counting method where you're like, I'm going to count from 1, just do my change in y over change in x, it's kind of just a good way to check yourself, right? So like, let's say you look at it and you're like, I know my answer should be negative, but you calculate a positive answer, you messed up somewhere. So it's kind of just a way to check yourself. All right, so let's go ahead and check this out here. So we're going to do 21 in 2 different ways. First, we're going to do the change in y over change in x just by looking at the graph, and then we'll go ahead and actually do it using the formula. So we'll go ahead. It doesn't matter where you start, okay? So let's say I start, I'll change my color here. Let's say I start on this dot, okay? To find my change in y, I have to go up here. Right? So I went up 1, 2, 3, 4. So I went positive 4. Okay? Then to get to my other dot, I have to go in the negative direction. I do 1, 2, 3, 4. So I did 4, but it was in the negative direction. So my change in y, which is up and down, right? The y-axis goes up and down. My change in y was 4. My change in x was negative 4. So change in y over change in x is going to give me 4 over negative 4, which if you plug that in on your calculator, or you should be able to hopefully do that in your head, you get a negative 1. So your slope here should be negative 1. Now I'm going to show you another way to calculate slope. And actually, you know what? Let's go ahead. We'll do it with number 22. I'll help you out here. So we're going to use the formula. So what you can do is you can get what the coordinates of these 2 points. So this first point, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, so -4, +3. Right? This is a coordinate pair. It's always written as x comma y. X goes in the side-to-side direction. Y goes in the up and down direction. So I'd like for you to tell me what is the coordinate pair for the second dot down here. So that is going to be -1 and -4. All right. So now I've got my 2 points, and I'm going to go ahead and use the formula. So what I recommend you do until you get like really good at calculating slope is actually label them. So we're going to label this guy x1. We're going to label this guy y1. And we're going to label this guy x2 and y2. All right. It doesn't matter which one you label. You could go ahead and, label this guy x2, y2, and x1, y1. It doesn't matter. Basically, the important part is that both the 1s come from the same point and both the 2s come from the same point. All right. So then we can go ahead and put this into our formula. So we're going to do y2, which is -4, minus our y1, which is 3, all over our x2, which is -1, minus our x1, which is a -4. All right. So again, we can apply these, and I still don't want you to use a calculator for this. I want you to keep practicing. So we could use our rules here. First, you check to see if there is 2 signs next to each other. On the top, there is not, right? It's -4 minus 3. So we can go to the song, and we have 2 negatives, right? So same signs we're going to add. So it's going to give me a 7 and keep the sign, which is negative. Then this bottom one here, I do have to rewrite, and the reason I have to rewrite it is because I have 2 signs next to each other. Minus minus gives me a plus, so I get -1 plus 4, which is going to give me, let's see, I'm running out of space here, how lovely. I get a -7 on top, and then here we have different signs, right? We have a minus and a plus. So different signs subtract. 4 minus 1 gives me 3, and then I'm going to keep the sign of the bigger number. Well, my bigger number is 4, so it stays positive. So my answer here I got is -7/3. Sometimes you'll have to reduce the fraction. Like here, right, we were able to reduce 4 over -4 to -1. But -7/3 we can't reduce. So yeah. And we could go ahead and just check this, right? If we start here, we start at this point, we go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is my 7 there. And then I'm going to go -3, 1, 2, 3. All right. So that is how that works. All right, and then last one, this is just doing calculating slope from 2 points, not from a graph. So again, you could just label these x1, y1, x2, y2, and we're going to use our formula, y2 minus y1 all over x2 minus x1. All right, so then we're going to do 15 minus 15 all over -9 minus -6. So we calculate the top, we get a 0, and we calculate this bottom. We have to rewrite it, so we get -9 plus 6, which is going to give me a -3. 0 divided by -3 gives me 0.